it is time for theme
Theme
number
number
2.
I was going to say 3. 2. 2. I can
We're
count.
still on 2.
I can count. I really can.
All right. What are we talking about today? Let's see. What are we talking about?
Squaring up.
Oh my goodness. Julie Hallquist, I don't even think you knew what I was going to be talking about. You must be reading my mind through that computer.
Look at
I always
that.
have trouble measuring up blocks. Well, guess what? So we talked about, yesterday we talked about rotary cutting basics.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
And so I just gave my tips for that. And today I was going to talk about something totally different. And someone said, I would love it if you would talk about squaring up blocks. And I was like, oh, you know
Which
what?
is really
I didn't
good.
have that on the radar, but I could totally do that.
Well, and honestly, I don't think there's a lot of patterns out there who do not, they just say, square it up to this and this. And I've learned a lot just since working here that I did not know about squaring up.
Yeah.
So,
well, it is important because if you don't square up your blocks before it goes into a quilt, then you get,
do that again.
There you go. And it was Lynn who's asked me about that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you know what? Why not? Let's talk about squaring up blocks today.
I like what Kelly says. You just keep cutting off. I've done that too. And of course, it's when I don't have any extra fabric. To make
Kelly, that is true. I've been known to do that. Pretty soon, that 7.5-inch block is about 5 inches. Sometimes that happens, right?
You still got to sew it in, so you're going to lose another 1/2 inch.
Yes. So, anyway, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about squaring up blocks. So, I hope I can do it justice. I kind of put things together at the last minute because I thought, that's what we're going to do. We're just so you know, we were going to talk about Minky, and maybe I'll just save Minky for another time. But I thought quilting the quilt blocks was important enough that I would do it today. So, let me bring up, I did create some banners here to share with you. And this kind of goes along with what Carillisa just said. Be as close to the unfinished size as possible, right? In a perfect world, it would be 100% perfect, right? We would cut perfect. We would sew perfect. We would
your seam would go like
the things
this.
Perfect. Yeah. Wouldn't do that.
Sometimes it's almost straight, but not quite. What am I saying?
You would press perfect, all of those things. So I think one of the things that, when I told Carillisa today, I said, guess what? We're gonna talk about squaring up blocks. She goes, oh, I've got a great thing to say. And you said,
well, you asked me, what would you say? I would say, don't stress about it. I was just worried. Okay, did I give enough 1/4 inch here? Did I give enough?
Yeah.
I get worried about down to the 1/8 of an inch. I don't know. Some of you may be like me, but in the end, I look at my seam, I measure across like you're supposed to, and I average. I just go the best average down because they're never perfect. They're never perfect. And if you can get it, even a little bit of trimming will make a difference in the finished product.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always kind of lean towards, if you're about 1/8 of an inch, maybe it's not the perfect, but if you're within 1/8 of an inch, you're probably going to be just fine. You can play around with your 1/4 inch later as you start to put these things together. I don't want you to fret too much. Now, if you're more than 1/8 of an inch, then you've got some decisions to make.
Do you find that when you've squared them all up and you're off a little bit like that 1/8 of an inch, that a lot of times it kind of comes out in the wash because you're gonna pin those corners together like you have another few checks and balances, right?
Yes, and sometimes my seam allowances will be a little bit larger or a little bit smaller
to accommodate the
perfect. But I will say that the most important thing to do when you're sewing, and I firmly believe this, and I found a little picture to illustrate this: keep calm and sew on. Okay, so
I don't know how often that happens for me. Probably because I'm usually sewing with a deadline.
Yeah.
And it's usually the night before.
So true. Well, especially when that happens, that's when I'm like, forget about it. It's fine. It's just fine.
It's going to have to
It's on the galloping horse, right?
Yep.
So, just enjoy the process and don't get so hung up on it.
Remember, it's
Now,
for fun.
again, if it's within about an eighth of an inch, if it's a lot further, then you have other decisions to make. Do you redo the block entirely? And sometimes you have to do that in order for everything to come together.
And it's just easier. I've learned that if I try to make one squeak through, because I didn't want to, I spend so much more time than it would have been if I had just done another block.
Do another block, if you need to. I know it can be frustrating and maddening, but sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you have to say, you know what? It's okay if I don't have that perfect point in one area, because guess what?
But is it?
It is. It is.
It is.
It totally is, because you have to just allow yourself like the grace to just be like, you know what? I'm not perfect. My sewing wasn't perfect. It's okay. I'm still going to enjoy this. And guess what? The person who's receiving it, or even if you have it hanging,
they're not going to see it.
Life's too short to worry about it.
I didn't even redo my last one, and I completely flipped. Remember that Stars and Stripes?
I do remember. And now it's a great story, right?
It's a great story. And I thought I would redo it, and I just didn't. I just left it. I'm like, well, it is what it is. Yeah. I thought I'd remake a new one.
No.
Imperfect is okay.
Exactly.
How many of us actually turn our quilts into some big judge? Some of us do, like we do.
If you are into that,
you have to be a little more careful. But
if you're not, then that's okay too.
Keep calm.
And so on. We got this. All right. So the second point I want to make is, where possible, cut blocks larger and then square up to size. All right. So here's an example for you. Whenever I do half square triangles, I always, if it tells me to, I hate when pattern will say cut 3 7/8. And I go, no.
I'll just round that up.
Thanks. I'm going to round that up to 4 inches, right? I'm going to round it up to 4 inches because it's going to be a lot easier on the eyesight. It's going to be easier to put together, and I'm not going to be so stressed when it comes to sewing. If you can give yourself like an 1/8 to a 1/4 inch bigger,
measure a little bit bigger,
and then you trim it down, it almost always will become flawless. It really is amazing.
Good,
right?
Tip. I like that one. I mean, honestly, it makes sense, but I never do it. I do round up if it's like a 7/8, but to just do your cutting instructions just a tiny bit.
I always just do a little bit bigger. Yeah.
So all patterns should be written like that.
I totally agree. Yes. So in fact, whenever I write a pattern, I always do it based off of a little bit larger, and then you square it down.
I think I'll change the way I write patterns.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to show you some examples here in a minute, but I just want to go through some of these points. Number 3, you're going to find a rotating mat very helpful with this process. Am I right?
I didn't realize how cool they were.
Yeah.
They're that cool.
Yeah, they are. My personal favorite is the Sue Daily pink rotating mat. I love this thing. Has a nice heavy base to it that's all together as one, so it doesn't pop out. A lot of you have heard me talk about this before, that with another brand that I used, it has 2 separate pieces. So sometimes when I turn it, actually pops out of the little hole
a little bit.
Yeah, and so this I don't have to worry about.
Before she came up with this one, this nice large one, my mom has a Lazy Susan without the ridge.
And
that's what she would use. But
really?
I love,
that works.
Yeah, nice big Lazy Susan, because the other ones were too small. But I love that. You've got this is self-healing too, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great product.
So then I also use a center seam to measure off when you can. Okay, so if you're doing a 5-inch block and you go from the center 2.5 inches, center 2.5 inches, and then you cut from there. Okay. With that being said, I will also say that if you have like a certain pattern to the block, you're going to want to trim one side and then the opposite side so that you don't end up skewing that pattern. So you go one and then opposite, and then you go up here and then opposite again to prevent any of the skew from shifting.
I had never thought about that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
I like it.
And then finally, and then I'll get to showing you some things, is my 6th point is, if a majority of your blocks are smaller, then it's okay to square them all up smaller.
I've had to do that.
And I don't know if there was one time, it was it was earlier when I started quilting, but I did catch on very quickly to this idea that it's okay to fidget things, meaning if it's not exactly the way it looks in the pattern, it's okay if it's okay with me. And
I like it. If it's not, it's okay if it's okay with you.
No, exactly. Yep. If you make them all the same size, then it's fine. So even, I will say, even with star points, so this was a star pattern. I wish I still had it to this day. I don't think
in all the quilts, you didn't keep track of that one.
No, but it was a star table runner, and I constantly noticed that I was cutting off my points, and it caused me so much frustration. And finally, I got to the point where I said, you know what? I'm just going to cut off all the points, and that is what the pattern is going to look like.
It's no longer points. Now it's just a little.
It's just edge.
I love it.
Seriously, I said to myself, you know what? That's the way the pattern is. They have squared off points on stars. Yep.
And then Linda says that's what makes it one of a kind.
Exactly.
So, and in all honesty, how many different quilt pattern blocks are there? There's going to be one that looks just like the one you just fudged.
There are squared off points all the time.
All the time.
And if you make them all squared off points, then nobody knows that it was not supposed to be a squared up point. So little tidbit from Kris.
I like it. I like it. Yes.
So
it's like the tip that you gave where you go ahead and cut the seam on the back and get it when the seam's sewn. Never mind. It was a year ago. Never mind.
Oh, when you talked about tinkles.
Kinkles. Yes. So, I mean, I don't always remember the 3 at 3, but I always remember that every time I sniff now, I'm like, oh yeah. And Kris said it was okay.
Yep. If you don't know what she's talking about, I'll show you. Here's a block. She's talking about like when a seam was supposed to go one way and it's not, and
it got sewn
the opposite way. There is nothing wrong with when taking some scissors, cutting a little clip, and then you force that seam where you want it to go.
You're in charge.
You are the boss. Exactly, Johnny. Be the boss of your own quilt. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. So those are some little points here of like, just let go of perfection and just enjoy the process. Okay. Now, again, if I did it on like one quilt block and I was trying to be so precise, then yeah, I might redo that one. Right. So you have to make that decision. But there's also the other side of things that says, you know what, it's fine. It's fine. Nobody's going to even worry about it. No one's going to see it.
And there have been times when I literally did not have any more fabric with me and it had to be done the next day.
Exactly.
Right? So those kind of things happen. But for the most part, another tip. Yeah. Just make sure you have a little extra fabric for those extra blocks that you're going to have to make.
Exactly.
Plan for it.
Yeah. Kathy says it won't talk back. So
I like it.
And Brenda says she snips and flips all the time. Who's ever going to see it?
I like it.
Exactly. All right. So let's go ahead and now show you some of the things that I want to point out when it comes to squaring up blocks. Okay. So we're going to
fun part.
Yeah, this is the fun part. I'm going to bring this over and first off, I'll go ahead and show you a half square triangle. So this was 5 inch. This is a 5-inch square. I want to cut this down to be 2 4.5-inch half square triangles. Okay. So the line, or you went from diagonal to diagonal. We sewed a 1/4 inch on each side of that line. Okay. And now what I'll do is cut down the center. So I'm going to place my ruler here. And I cut it down. Now, here's another tip. If you've been in some of my classes, you've heard me talk about this before. But when it comes to half square triangles, there will be some who say, bring it out, press it out, and then trim it up. I am under I would rather save a little bit of time. And I think it's actually the Kris. Yeah, the school of thought of Kris.
Yeah.
Kris. Yeah.
I'm under the Kris's school of thought.
Exactly. I would rather keep that baby closed and I'm going to square it up just like this. Then I only have 2 sides to square up rather than 4. Why not? Yeah. So I'm going to use another favorite ruler of mine, which is the Tucker Trimmer 1. How many of you have this ruler?
I have 2 of them.
So do I. Because I don't want
I
to lose
misplaced
it.
one of them once, and now I have 2, and I'm so glad.
I don't want to be without it.
It is one of my very
is.
favorites.
There's other rulers out there on the market that will do the same thing. So if you've got something that is, similar to this, that's the square
Quilt in a Day
ruler.
has one.
Quilt in a
too.
Day has a great one.
Creative
Grids has one. Yeah. So you could totally do this. You know what? Let me show you an example real quick of something. If I could also use my regular ruler. Now, this one's not going to, this is too small for this, but let me just illustrate one point. If I wanted to do a 3-inch half square triangle, what I would say is that I'm going over 3 and I'm going over 3, and I pretend there's an imaginary line going across from 3 to 3. I put it on my sewn line,
your imaginary line, which is great because you can see that it's measuring up.
And then I would go trim and trim across, and then I would have a perfect 3-inch half square triangle. So had I had a larger ruler here, I could have done the 4.5 that I had wanted, but I only have 3 inches across here. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so you can square things up on a regular ruler. You're just going to go over, so if it's, let's say 2.5 inches, you go over 1, 2.5, you go down 1, 2.5, you have created an imaginary line. You could put a piece of tape there. You can just place the ends of your 2.5s on the sewn line. Okay, just like that. I've got one here and one there, and then trim, trim. There we go. I have a perfect 2.5. Okay, now that's how you do it without a specialty ruler. But I really do love the Tucker trimmer because it has those imaginary lines already marked for me. All right. So if I want to do a 4.5-inch half square triangle, do you see it goes 4.5? 4.5. I have that right there. There's a dotted line there. Boom. All I have to do is place that 4.5-inch line on my sewn line. Okay. And then I can trim from there. Whoops.
And like many rulers, there's the whole numbers and the half numbers.
Yes.
Which is nice.
Exactly. So here we go. I can do a little trim. This is really, really close. So it's going to be just a smidgen off.
I think sometimes I get freaked out too if it didn't need to be trimmed, and I think I've done something wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I probably did do something wrong, but
that's right. Okay, so I do a little trim here. This is why I love the rotating mat, is because I don't have to lift it up or anything. I place the palm of my hand here, and I'm going to do another cut. Notice it's just a little trim. It's just a smidgen, but it's amazing the difference it will make once you put your block together. All right.
Wouldn't you say that tiny little trim does make a difference to the points?
Oh, it makes a huge difference to the points. Absolutely. And then I can just push out that seam and, trim off those dog ears. And I have a perfect 4.5-inch half square triangle. I'm going to show this a little bit differently on this one. I'm going to trim it actually down to 4 inches so you can really see what's happening here. I'm going to turn this over to my 4-inch line right here. That line goes directly onto my sewn line. That was right there. Okay, place my 4. It's directly on the sewn line. Do you see the edge that's going to be trimmed up? Here we go. Boom. I have a 4-inch half square triangle. So it really is a wonderful ruler. This one will go up to 6.5 inches square. They have a larger one too, that is Tucker Trimmer 3. The Tucker Trimmer 2 will do 1/4 inches and 3/4 inches. So wonderful, wonderful rulers to have. Okay, I use them all the time for squaring up. You can square up blocks as well because there are squares here, so you can put it on something if you have something to cut out. If you have like a 2-inch square you need to cut out, you're just going to place it on your fabric. Let me give you an example. I'll take this piece of fabric. It's already been sewn, but I'm going to go ahead and pretend it's not. And let's say I wanted to do a 2-inch square. I can use it this way. I'm just lining up the left along the bottom, and I can cut out my 2-inch square just like this. Okay.
That never happens to me.
Never, never, never. And I have a 2-inch square. There you go. All right, so I use this also for quarter square triangles as well. So a great trim up ruler. Can you see why this would be a big deal? Here's another example for you. Let's say I did pull this out. Okay, I'm gonna trim this. I don't have an iron here, so I'm just finger pressing here.
Look at
yeah, exactly. And if I wanted to do, let's see, I'll go this way. I'm going to line up a center diagonal with a center diagonal here on the block. And let's say I want to do it as, I'll go to, let's do a 4-inch. Okay. All right, so we've got 4 inches here. You know what? I'm going to do 3.5. Okay, so I'm going to go down a little bit to the 4. I'm just lining it up here. Have that done. Rotate it. All right, then I want to turn it all the way around, and I now have that perfect side here. And then I just have to do it one more time. Okay. And I'm gonna do the 3.5. There we go. And trim. Okay, so there is that. All right. So, but I had 4 sides I had to cut. Whereas when you keep it folded, you only have 2 sides to trim up, which is really nice. All right, let's say that you have a finished pinwheel, for example. This could be any block, right? But if you have a center seam, that is what can be very helpful to you. So let me go ahead and, I'm not sure what Sherry sewed this up for me today. So thank you, Sherry. We're at 4 3/4. Let's say I want to square this up to be, we'll do it 4 inches. Okay, for simplicity. So if this needed to be 4 inches, then what I'm going to do is measure from the center over, what would it be, Carillisa?
Oh, I'm sorry.
2.
I was looking at the pattern.
Oh,
2 inches.
okay.
Yes, yes. I'm like, you want to do math right now on the spot? I can't do 4 minus 2.
Just making sure you were paying attention.
You were good. You were good.
I was thinking
about the pinwheel we were putting together before. So
yeah,
2.
No, you're good. 2. So we're going to measure over. I'm going to do 1, 2. I'm going to put that center line on the 2. Okay. And trim it up.
And this looks perfect, but sometimes my seams aren't perfect. This is where I have to go, okay, generally, this is my main line.
You get it
right?
as close as you can. Yeah, it may not be exact, but you get it as close as you can. And then remember how I talked about, I just like to do half, and then I do the other half to 2. So I'm going to come over here. 1, 2, this is my center line. I'll go this way, and I'm going to go the opposite 2. And one more time, the opposite 2. Oops, right there.
And you do it this way. Anytime you have a center seam, you can go from, right?
Yeah, if I have a center seam, then I'm feeling really good in the neighborhood, right?
Mhm.
If I've got a center seam, I'm going to definitely use it to my advantage. All right, so 2, 2, 2, and 2. All right, let's see. What other questions? Oh, there might be times when, let me grab, here's a little sneak peek, by the way, of something happening next week
It's
on 3 at 3.
beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
So the other thing to point out is whenever possible, you want to make sure and keep that 1/4 inch seam intact between the point and the outside. You can see on this block, this goes a little bit beyond, so it will get a little bit of trimming here. And so I can take a look at that, place this up. Let's see. Yeah.
This
To
is where
my
I always
core.
messed up.
Really?
I trimmed to the point.
Oh yeah, don't trim to the
This
point.
was in the beginning.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know how well you can see that, but there is a 1/4 inch mark on my ruler. Whoops. There we go. And I'm lining that 1/4 inch mark to the point. All right, to the point, and then I'll trim up any excess from there. Isn't that a cute block?
I love it. And did I tell you last week that I don't like red and pink?
Yes, you did.
I did, and she looked at me really funny, but this is really cute. So maybe I do like red and pink.
You guys,
that's pretty dang cute.
you just wait. Next week we have the most fun week planned. I'm so excited. So this is a preview of things to come. But and so again, when you have points like this, you really do want to keep in mind that 1/4 inch between the point and the edge to make sure that you're because if you were to trim all the way to the point, well, that looks nice right now, but guess what? When it goes into the quilt, it goes another 1/4 inch, and there you are left with the chunky,
The cutoff points.
The cutoff points. Let's
chunky
start
star?
the chunky star.
I like it. I like it.
We'll
Now you're
come
going to have to do all of your blocks, even if they were perfect. You're going to have to turn them all into chunky stars.
Exactly. You know what? We will come up with a girlfriend's pattern called Chunky Star where you don't have to be perfect.
I love it. I love it. And all of you who expect it to look like a star.
You're in for a real treat. It's the Chunky Star. So anyway, too fun. You know, if you have larger rulers that, you know, are square rulers, let's say, for example, if I had a 12-inch block that needed to be 12 inches, then you could have, you know, that bigger ruler, place it right on there, and then you can see all 4 sides at once, right?
Yeah.
So
and then
it
you
just
just
depends.
use your little turntable and go round and round.
Here we go. Let's see. Press seams open or over to the dark side, Indy is asking. Yes.
The school of thought on this one. Well, Kris's school of thought. Which is the right one, by the way.
Well, not necessarily.
I'd like to say
that. Right.
I
I'd love to think that, but no, it's not true, because this is the thing. I always say this too. If you get a room of 100 quilters and you ask them this question, what are they going to say? They're going to have 100 different answers.
Yeah.
So the real thing is, it kind of depends. Most of the time, more oftentimes than not, I will go towards the dark side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't see the shadow of the fabric. And also that way, when you nest things up, you can, it's like
you can't nest
set them up
when you're doing them pressed
open,
yeah.
Right? But there are times when I need to press them open because there's so much bulk going in at one center place that you definitely need to press them open.
And
so
if you have it long arms,
here's another example. Oh yes, here's another example.
Release the bulk.
Is let's see. We've got, well, we'll probably talk about this next week, how you open up those little 4 patch squares. But you know, all the seams were pressed over to the side, and just the places where they came at intersections were actually pulled open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first learned how to nest the seams together to get that better connection. I had always been pressing my seams open. That's how I'd been taught. And
oh, it's so much work.
So much better to nest,
It's
but
so
it's
much-
worth. Yeah,
it's just so much more
is.
work.
I will do it in, where I pressed everything to the side for most of it. And then at the end, when you really are getting a lot of fabrics coming together.
Okay, here's
I'll
an
press
example.
it
Here's
open.
another block from next week.
Ooh, little sneak peeks.
Yeah. You've got, let's see, she pressed most of the seams to the side, but on the last seam, she pressed open because you have a lot going on there. So it just kind of depends. So what's the difference between the Tucker rulers? Lisa is asking. Are you talking about just Tucker trim?
Like between the different Tucker rulers?
There's lots of Tucker rulers, but if you're talking about the Tucker trim rulers, this one is Tucker trimmer one is the one I use the most often. And it is between 1 and 6.5 inches. The larger ones, the Tucker Trimmer 3 is up to, I believe, 9 inches. The Tucker Trimmer 2 has the 1/4 inch and 3/4 1/4 inch markings on there. So,
and they're just bigger as they get bigger, right? That's most of the difference is the size.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway.
But then like this one, from this one to another brand per se, I think this one is easiest to read for me.
I would agree with that.
It's the easiest one to read.
For sure. Brenda said she loves how flat her blocks are when she presses flat. Yeah, it's true. I mean, you'll get a flatter block for sure. It's just, it is a little bit more tedious to open up a seam, but it's completely up to you. Let's see. Kathy's loving the blocks. Which day next week? All week long. It's going to be all week long. We're doing two new blocks every day next week. Cool. And at the end of the week, it'll all go into one special quilt. So
I love that.
I know. We're very excited.
So Roxanne had a question right there.
Let's see. Oh, please do talk about how to do that seam pressed. How to do this. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Do you know?
No.
Yeah. So hopefully, Roxanne, that helped explain about why you would open up a seam versus why you would put one to the side. Most of the time, I'm putting mine to the side. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought she was talking about maybe how we're pressing it. Anyway, sorry, Roxanne, if we're totally confused as to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And if I threw a wrench in the thing by just bringing it up, sorry.
And Debbie said, yeah, it's harder to nest the seams when they are pressed open. And that's true. It is definitely
if you don't
harder.
need to nest and it doesn't bother you, then you're going to press them open.
Yeah.
But I just found for me, it was so much easier to get a perfect point when I could nest my seams.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, there's that. I hope those things have helped explain a little bit more about my thoughts on squaring up. I'll go over through it real quickly. Again, be as close to the unfinished size as possible. You know, if you have to do a little, here and there, if it's about 1/8 of an inch, you're going to be fine. We can work all those things out. And then if it's a lot more, then you really do have to go back to the drawing board and say, what's happening? Am I taking too much of a seam allowance? Not enough of a seam allowance?
Is my 1/4 inch off?
Is my 1/4 inch off? Is the thread too thick? Because thread takes up space. So get a nice thin 50 weight thread, and you shouldn't have problems with that. Am I pressing correctly? All of those things can make a difference. Sometimes I know that when something doesn't come out the size I want, guess what I do? Just steam that baby. No, that's terrible.
I used to. Sometimes I can still get away with it.
Sometimes you can get away with it.
Yeah.
But just as long as you're not shoving those seams out and distorting them. But sometimes it's as simple as giving it a better press. Number 2, where possible, cut the blocks larger and then square up to size. Number 3, you will find a rotating mat very helpful with this process. Number 4, use a center seam to measure off when you can. Number 5, if you have a pattern to the block, you're going to want to trim one side, then the opposite side, then this side, and then this side, so as to prevent any skew. And then the last one, if a majority of your blocks are smaller, it's okay to square them up all smaller.
You can come up
Just
with a
saying.
chunky star.
Chunky star. There you go. All right. I hope that information helped for all of you today. Okay. So if, let me see. Oh, yes, Debbie, definitely next week we'll be talking about that little 4 square in the back of the quilt when you rotate the seams. It's one of my favorite things.
I know. And for some reason,
love it.
I need to be retaught it all the time.
Like, Carillisa, you got this.
I do. And
You
then I go,
got this.
it's
We
like
can
trying
do
to
this.
figure out how
Here's
to do a
another one.
pinwheel, right?
Here's another block for next week. And you can see the little 4 patch in the back. So we'll talk about that next week as well. Okay. That helps really flatten where everything comes together for sure. All right. Sue asked, did I sew them right sides together? Have an issue with that once in a while. Sue, are you talking about the right sides of the fabric together? If that's the case, yes. Yes, whenever we sew our fabric together, it's right sides together, and then we do that.
I find I have a problem with that if the pattern is very good on the back as well as the front, and then I might, it's just a little bit less dark. I find that that's when I usually mess up, so I have to look a little closer to the patterns. Yeah, it's the pattern fabric.
It's true. Tina asked, how large of a block can you square up to on the 16-inch mat? I would say probably 15 inches, up to a 15-inch block on this. We also have the 10-inch rotating mat as well, which is really nice. I happen to love the 16-inch because I use my Kimberbell orange pop rulers on them, which is wonderful.
Yeah, but you could get the smaller one if you're traveling around.
Definitely.
And you want to save space.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right.
We all need something in every size,
thank you.
Right?
She's yeah, exactly. Why have it in one size when you can have it in 2?
Yeah. She's brand new to quilting. Cool, Nanette.
Yay, we're so glad you're here,
you're getting
Nanette.
off on the right foot instead of my way of doing it.
There you go. There you go. Too fun. Oh, Tana asked, that's why she was asking, was orange pop. Oh yeah, Tana, orange pop rulers work amazingly on this. You will love it. It's like life-changing. Not to sound dramatic or anything.
You're never dramatic.
Never, ever. But too much fun.